It's a sunny winter morning in Delhi, and I thought of catching up with my friend Aman. He's the co-founder of Keventers, the Milkshake brand, which is spread across over 200 outlets, not just in India but even in Dubai and Kenya. After a quick round of tennis, I sit down with him to understand how to start and scale a QSR food business in India, how there is a surge of modern-day food trucks in our country and how their model works. What are the consumer tastes and preferences across different parts of the country? Are franchisees profitable and why do so many franchisees fail? We understand everything from capital investment, operational costs, challenges and products that make super high margins. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja. So, Aman, as you can see, we've set up this entire picnic setup because I remember back in school, how many years were we together?
I think 11th and 12th for sure.
Yeah.
But in the middle, 5th and 6th, those.
5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, I remember for sure.
Right.
Maybe a couple of years prior to. So I think out of 13 years of being in St. Columbus School, maybe nothing more, at least 6 years, I think we were together.
Absolutely.
The reason I remember 5th to 8th we were together is because Aman Arora and Sarthak Ahuja, and I was, I think, roll number 5 and you were possibly
I'm
roll number
always 6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah, because our roll numbers used to be in alphabetical order of the last name. And Aman would always sit behind me in the exams.
Yes.
And I remember before the exam, he would call me up and say, "Ki tu ye chapter kar liyo, main ye chapter kar liyo."
I must say, you're the most helpful neighbor.
And so many school picnics and going to Agra and Lodi Garden.
That
and
was
all.
the first one.
Yeah, and in Delhi. So I thought, what better place to do this than Central Delhi? Set up this picnic, have some Keventers milkshakes, and learn everything about how you set up Keventers and the entire story, and how other people who want to set up maybe like a QSR business today, how should they think about doing it? Because what I remember back when we were in school, there was this corner store.
Right opposite A block, very close to Palika. We used to go there.
We used to go there and have milkshakes, and that is what I knew of Keventers. So I remember when you guys kind of organized it and made it formal, I was just wondering, how is the IP working? Have they registered it? I later read about the story, but would love to kind of hear it from you.
Interestingly, you know, when we used to go there, a lot of Colombian friends, right? And even with families, we're going there. And I always wondered, why don't we have more Keventers? Because it's such a great product. There's always a line outside. And the place remains small always. Whereas Wenger's on the other side, you could see that, you know, it's growing and they've opened another shop. So that was always a question. Like, I wasn't sure why it wasn't growing. Later on, when after I met Agastya, I spent some time with him. He mentioned that his grandfather had started Keventers.
Really?
And that was the aha moment, because, you know, we were anyway discussing new business ideas around that time. And I felt like I stumbled upon it, and it's a gold mine. And one of the hardest things to do today, as you may understand, is creating a brand.
That's right.
So when you have a brand name that's so synonymous with milkshakes, dairy, so half the battle is won.
That's right.
So there were no two ways about it. Even though we had no prior experience whatsoever, we decided we'll jump into this as partners. The choice that we had to make was whether we get into manufacturing or retail servicing. And historically, I'm not sure how much you know about Keventers, but we were primarily a manufacturing business.
It was a dairy.
Yes. 1925 is when Edward Keventer, a Swedish dairy entrepreneur, set up Keventers. Fast forward to 1940, pre-independence time, you know, a lot of businesses had to shut shop, or they had to change hands. And that's when Edward Keventer sold the business to Ramakrishna Dalmia.
Okay.
And from the 40s until about the 80s, it was primarily a manufacturing business, selling biscuit, ghee, milk, not milkshakes, ice cream. And all the production used to happen at this SP Marg, which is the diplomatic zone today. And unfortunately, the factories had to shut down because of the 1984 riots that happened around that time. And there were other issues also with, having a factory in central Delhi. Today, you can no longer operate a factory there. So lot of setbacks, and that led to some stores opening around Keventers, which would actually distributor shops, which is modern day franchising, right? And that's where production used to happen at the factory, and we used to distribute these milkshakes across all these stores. So the business of Keventers was primarily manufacturing. And when we first went out, we were consulting, we were basically meeting people, right? People who had established brands. And many people said, listen, do not get into retail servicing. It's a very difficult business. Get into manufacturing. And initial thoughts were to get into manufacturing, but once we understood the requirement, because we also had to take some form of loan from our parents, right?
right.
And the cost of setting up a factory would be humongous for us
Yeah.
at that time. So we decided we'll get into retail servicing, and it's something it's also very visible, right? Like you're consuming milkshakes, fast food all the time. You're going to Narulas. Narulas has been, I can't think of too many brands at that time. Maybe a cafe coffee day was operating, uh, and barista was operating. So something that, we're consumers of these products. So we decided we'll get into retail servicing because it somehow just felt right. And that's how the journey began. It was finally in 2015 that we opened our first store.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you guys got it contract manufactured from somewhere. The milkshake.
No, no, no. What I was trying to tell you was that manufacturing was the previous business, but we decided to get into retail servicing. And in retail servicing, also, we had to do everything from scratch, right? What happens in our business is that the key products, that is your ice cream and your milk, primarily this milk, the shelf life is a problem.
Correct.
And to deliver milk every day, it doesn't make sense to do it through warehouses, like through having a logistic chain like that, where milk is first received in a warehouse and then delivered to the store. Milk is the only product that is directly delivered to the store, because
And that's
milk is
like an
available everywhere.
Amul or a Mother Dairy, or is it?
Mostly mother dairy, but
Okay.
mother dairy is not available in south.
That's
so
right.
in south we find a different vendor. What really makes the difference for us is the ice cream and the flavors we use.
Okay.
Milk, more or less, is we get it right. I mean, they're not too far apart in terms
And the
of
local
profile.
vendors. So you'll ensure it just comes from the local party.
Yeah,
and-
like a Punjab, you have Vedka. In South, you have
Correct.
some other dairy. Mostly these will be the popular, the large players.
Oh, so it's mostly it's a milkshake retail outlet where, depending on the kind of flavor you want,
Yeah,
the milk is coming from a local supplier.
right.
The biscuits and chocolates are coming, which also belong to either like a Nestle or a Lotus Biscoff or some
Right.
such. And the person at the outlet is essentially just mixing it all together, bottling it, and serving it.
That's right.
That's what
However,
it is?
specifically ice cream is our own IP,
Okay.
and sometimes 60-70% of the flavors are also made by us. So
Okay. And is it
the
contract
classics.
manufactured, or you guys now manufacture it yourself?
It's contract manufactured.
Okay. And then 2015 is when you opened your flagship or your first at Select City Walk.
That's right.
Okay. How big was the space?
It almost like 70-80 square feet.
Okay.
That's very, very less space for today. When we operate Keventers stores, we take minimum 200 square feet, 150 square feet,
Okay.
because there's always some additional space required. We have added more products today. 70-80 is very tight, but that was very interesting about our model, right? Because typically you've seen QSRs around. They would be 500 square feet, 1,000 square feet also. And by the way, 900 square feet, there are some bylaws and some certifications that kick in. So we also try and keep it less than 900 for that reason. What was very unique about our model was milkshake was always the side category. Like you go to a pizza shop, or you're buying pizzas, burgers, you've got all these chains. Milkshake was always the side category. What we did was we focused on this side category, made it into our main category. And for milkshakes, you don't require too much equipment.
That's right.
You require decent amount of working space, storage space, and just you want your refrigeration and your display and the POS counter. So we were able to squeeze it down to 100 square feet, 150 square feet.
100 square feet is actually nothing.
It's nothing. So what was, again, why malls love us and retail players love us, because we earn one of the highest per square feet Our
I can
sales is
imagine.
per square feet wise some of the highest. We would even beat Haldiram's, right?
Mm.
Because they would require a lot of space.
Yeah.
So made perfect sense to create this kind of model, and it also makes it very scalable, right? Because the requirement of capital is, I mean, at least one third of a regular QSR.
Okay.
So around 20-25 lakhs, we're setting up a store.
Okay. So when you set it up, a typical place of say 100 to 150 square feet
Mm-hmm.
can be set up in 20-25 lakhs.
Yeah.
Okay. And what does the spend go into? Like you would spend into say kitchen equipment, your refrigerator,
Right.
and then there would be interiors, the post counter. So typically, what does the split look like?
The split would be pretty equal. I think roughly around 5 to 6 lakhs is what we're spending on equipment. Then there is construction costs. You can assume almost like 200 rupees to 300 rupees. Also, because it's tiny, so the rates are going to be 300, 400 sometimes. Then there is also deposits to be considered. You're paying 2 months to 6 months. So why I'm saying 2025 is place like Bombay, you're required to pay a higher security deposit versus Delhi, maybe about 2 to 3 months.
So on an average, it's about 6 months, right? Like
I think these days they're requesting around 3 months. 3 months has always been in Delhi, but Bombay, I think it can go up to 6 to 9 months.
Bangalore would be higher.
I think so, around 6 months too.
Okay.
But it can vary depending on high street versus malls.
So 20 to 25 lakhs, you set up the space.
Right.
How many people do you need to run it? 2 people?
Actually, no. You can't manage with 2 people because you also have to consider leaves. So you
And
want shifts. So we're talking at least 3.5 to 4.
Okay.
That's we don't want to go over 4. Of course, if it's high traffic, high volume, then we can go up to about 6 people.
But for a 150 square feet, you would think 3 to 4 people should be sufficient.
Yeah, 2 inside, and if of course, like I said, traffic, then you may want to have one person standing outside just welcoming or having some interaction with the customer.
And how would you split their roles? Is there one person or 2 people making, or everyone should be trained on making, because anyway it's a simple product? And
it's a simple product, and to also optimize our costs, we want everyone to know. Sometimes, like I said, there might be leaves, 2 people missing, one person taking the day off, so you want everyone to be able to make a milkshake. So
okay,
that's a deal breaker for us when we're hiring.
So today, if anyone wants to set up a place in a high footfall area like a mall, what really happens is you can't buy the property anyway.
You can't.
You have to lease it. And then it's on a revenue sharing with a minimum guarantee of rent.
That's
and
right,
a revenue
mostly.
sharing, which is a percentage. And I believe it should be close to about 15-18% at a place like a
I
Select
think when
City
we
Walk.
started it was about 17 to 18%.
Okay.
But yeah, it can vary depending on your brand, of course, 15 to 20%.
Okay, so 15 to 20% is the rent. Today, do you think if someone wants to start, how should they look at approaching and convincing like a Select City Walk, or maybe like the top mall? Think a Palladium in
Right.
Bombay, right? Or a Elante in Chandigarh. Do you think there's a hack you figured? How do you convince them? Does it take like making a full pitch deck to convince the realtors, or what is the way to do it?
Yes, of course. Even back in 2015, we had to make a pitch deck, by the way, right? People know of the brand, but still they expect that kind of presentation. They want to know what your plans are. So that's a must have. Knowing the people in this network is also important. For us, we had to, because our first store was Select City Walk, it was also easier because we had a brand name, but we also used to go to a lot of events and set up our stalls there to create that awareness. So I think we must have done about 5 to 6 food festivals before we met someone from Select City Walk who saw us at one of these
Like
festivals.
a Grub Fest or a Zoma Land, but
yeah, this is all
smaller ones.
pre-Zoma Land. So I think there was the Palette Festival that used to happen. Grub was also, I think, happening around that time.
Okay. So say today when you set up such a store, would you prefer a high street or a mall, or do you guys have like some benchmarks around deciding?
I think it varies product to product, brand to brand. We in fact, interestingly, we did some research and we spent a lot of time doing this research. We may be paying higher rental in the malls, but the revenue wise and margin wise, we're doing much better.
In the malls?
Yeah. The
Because
malls,
of the footfall.
it's the footfall. You constantly getting new audience. Sometimes, let's say if I'm locating my store in a residential area or where there's a not lot, I mean, where churning is not happening, so there is a chance that people get fatigued and they don't want to consume your product. But a place like Select City Walk or a mall, you'll always have fresh new footfall coming in. So it's a great place for
To start off.
awareness and also sales. And you can see I mean, a growth is also seen best in some of these places.
Okay. So 20-25 lakhs, preferably at an organized asset, which is like a
Yes.
mall. If not, it can also be a high street, but preferably because you get the footfall there.
Yes.
Then we come to about 3 to 4 people to manage this space.
Mhm.
All should know how to make milkshakes.
For sure.
Yeah. And
No two ways about it.
yeah, and they should know how to manage the POS.
Uh-huh.
And they should also be inviting enough to get customers and serve them. Typically, what kind of sales do you
Mhm.
think on an average,
Mhm.
if the area selection is good and it's a
Mhm.
healthy mix of both high street as well as malls,
Mhm.
what do you think a store like that should do in terms of revenue?
Uh, okay, again, see, rent is a very important metric to consider here. Typically, you don't want to pay more than 15 to 18% of your total revenue. So,
Correct.
I think if I give you a national average, from a national average, sale should be upwards of 8 to 9 lakhs per month,
Per month. Okay.
right? I'm also assuming that the rent is somewhere in the range of 1.5, 2 lakhs here.
So I would say let's take it to be 10 lakh per month, because there's also GST which goes away,
Yeah.
doesn't get added to your
I'm only giving you
net
net
revenue.
sales because
Correct.
in our business,
Correct.
there is no GST input.
Correct.
So we lose all that GST.
So which is why 10 lakhs per month is what you should at least be selling
Right.
if you start this
Mhm.
kind of a facility.
Yeah, that's what you should aim for. I think that's the minimum, because as you also grow your brand, there will be locations where you might be paying rental, but the sale will also come down.
Sure.
So, in fact, initially our average sale used to be much higher because of the kind of locations we had. The A plus locations, you have to aim much higher than that.
Okay.
Probably, I would say 15 lakhs to 20 lakhs. That's
Okay.
what you should be aiming for.
So that's about 30,000 rupees per day,
Mm-hmm.
more or less.
Right.
If it's 30,000 rupees worth of sales in a day,
Mm-hmm.
assuming your average order value is about 500 rupees.
Our average is actually around 350 rupees.
Okay.
And we have two averages that we look at. We also look at the delivery average. But typically, we're looking at a 300 to a 350 APC. High street APC, I mean, takeaway APC is much higher than the delivery average.
Okay. So you're saying about 100 orders per day
Mm-hmm.
is what you should, at the very minimum, aim for.
True.
100 orders per day
Mhm.
at 300, 350 rupees APC. If
Right.
you're able to do that consistently over a period of time, not just weekends, because I'm sure weekends the footfall
Yeah.
is higher and all of that, but on an average, if you're able to hit that, that's a good, healthy place
It's a
to
good,
start.
healthy place to start. And if you can do this across 5, 10, 15 stores, you really have a good product
Okay.
on paper, and scalability is there, I'm sure, for QSR in India. Then I think you should really go
I'm
this.
thinking if you sell like a milkshake for about, say, 300 rupees, is it?
Mhm. Our milkshakes actually costs around 200, 250
Okay,
rupees.
200, 250.
But your there's something what we look at is the item consumption
Okay.
per ticket, right? So that's never one. It's usually around 1.8 to 1.9.
What is
So-
that? 1.8?
So for every bill, we don't have one milkshake. We have
got
say
it,
one
correct.
when we have 1.8 consumption. per-
Understood. So most bills would be, say, 2 bottles.
2 bottles, right?
Yeah. Okay. So if say your milkshake costs about 200 to 250 rupees,
Right.
The material cost should ideally be within 20%, you think?
I think 20 would be golden. That's all.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to achieve 20% today, but anything around 29, 30%,
Okay.
or at the most 31, 32%, including discount,
Hmm.
is a good number to have.
Okay. So say 30%. Let's
Right.
take 30% is your cost of goods,
Mhm.
including the cost of the bottle.
The cost of everything. I'm talking about
Packaging,
the raw
material,
material, packaging,
raw material.
and in discounting as well.
And in
But
discount.
that again depends. I mean, depends on how you calculate.
And of course, there's wastage and spillage in food, and
That is all to be considered.
All to be
but
considered.
after a point, I think 1%. I mean, despite using glass bottles, if we can manage 1%, I'm pretty sure
sure,
most brands can.
correct. So that's 30% of the cost of goods.
Mm-hmm.
Another, you said, let's take 15% goes into rent.
15 to 20%. So
20%. Let's take
20%.
50% is gone.
Okay.
Now, how much does your manpower really take in this?
The manpower could also take roughly around 1.2 to 1.3 per store. Some, again, like I said, depending on the footfall, of course, you're looking at a number of 15% again.
Okay, so you're essentially saying 4 people at about 30 to 35,000 per month.
You see minimum wage here and everything. I think it's somewhere around hitting around 20.
Okay.
So, but you also have to hire assistant managers or managers. So,
Correct.
an average of 25 would be a good
25,000.
assumption.
That means about 1 lakh goes into
Right.
running this store,
Mhm.
which does about 10 lakh of revenue.
10. Yeah.
Plus, there would be staff welfare and costs over and above that.
That's
that
right.
Provident Fund and
Mhm.
ESIs and all these costs that you add on to it
Yes.
would come to about 1.5 lakh.
Right.
So that means about 65% is now gone.
Right.
30% to the product,
Mhm.
20% to the rent,
Mm-hmm.
15% to the manpower.
Right.
35% you set aside about 15% for overheads and admin costs, or are we missing out on something?
There will be the utilities, the
Okay.
electricity, water, etc. Again, depending on what business you have. In our case, there's not too much usage of electricity because we're only using blenders.
Correct.
And in some, today now we have ice cream machines. So the consumption has gone up a little bit. But that is the next piece, the utilities that you have. And an important cost to consider in this whole mix is the delivery commission. Now,
Hmm.
assuming your sale is 50% delivery and 50% takeaway, that 50% will attract that 18 to 20%. And if you obviously divide it in the whole scheme of things, 10% is now also going towards your commissions.
But my question is that with the malls, when you negotiate,
Mm-hmm.
is there a separate, revenue sharing that applies to deliveries other than what applies to
Interesting point.
in-house?
In some cases, we managed to do that, but that's something. I mean, in some cases, initially we were not doing it, but someone, I mean, within our team, of course, must gave that suggestion, and we've started doing that.
Okay, so what's the delta like? Like, I'm just thinking because if the mall is taking about 20%,
Mm-hmm.
Saying that I am getting you the footfall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if a Zomato or a Swiggy gets you the footfall
Mm-hmm.
and they take about 20%,
Mm-hmm.
ideally the mall should not be getting the
Yes.
same percentage, right?
Right.
So if someone has to negotiate, would you say in that case you should ideally give 50% of the revenue share that you've agreed to with the mall? So, for example, if the mall is taking 20% of the deliveries, they should take only 10% of revenue share, or what is the delta like?
I think we've done it in 2-3 different ways with,
Okay.
as far as I know. But I think the best way to perhaps do this is to separate the delivery sales, because
Okay.
delivery sales are going directly, are coming through Zomato and Swiggy mostly. So if you can carve out the delivery sales, because your POS is often managed by the mall, so all the dine-in sales are punched there. But it's not always possible to do that because malls also understand.
But
So
your deliveries don't reflect on the same POS.
they I mean, they can, and you can also separate it. Like
Okay.
I said, it's an option. But I don't think all real estate developers will agree. It's a very difficult one to battle. It's
Yeah.
something you can, of course, request for, ask for, but it may or may not happen.
But what places have you been able to crack it? Is it a location which anyway doesn't do too well, so you've got a bargaining power? Is it?
In a usually in places where we have a bargaining power. So the ones that are fairly established, they're not
They're not
very
gonna
very.
budge.
I mean, this can't be a deal breaker, obviously, because primary focus is, of course, to get sales, takeaway sales for the brand. And also, what I've seen is that malls, in terms of deliveries, malls tend to do. I mean, they do less business than high street. So the divide of delivery to takeaway sales will be less. So it might be about 20-30% for malls and 70% being takeaway sales. So
Okay.
I think the customer feels like they prefer to order from high street locations rather than mall locations.
Okay. So we removed 30% for cost of goods. We
Mhm.
removed 20% for rent. We
Mhm.
removed about 15% for staff costs. We were
Mhm.
left with 35%. You're
Right.
saying 5% may go into utilities.
A
We're
little
left
more
with
than 5%,
little more than
yes, but
5%.
but let's assume
Let's assume
5% for
5.
now.
Out of the
And
30%,
Mhm.
assuming 50% of the sales are deliveries
Mhm.
and 20% commission is going, that
Right.
means another 10%
Yes,
goes away in delivery commissions, which means you're left with essentially 20%.
20%.
And now this is the store level profit.
This is the store level profit, and 20%, I think, relatively, if I tell you, would be considered a very healthy one. It used to be much better because earlier we used to also get input for GST. Today,
Correct.
we're
Now you
also
don't.
losing that 5% in
Yeah.
our case. Uh, so that has also hit us, and the commissions are also going higher. So if your business is selling more on the delivery platforms, then it's not a very healthy situation to be in.
Then you might as well operate like a cloud kitchen and
Perhaps I think that may be a better idea, because what we've also not considered here is the CPC cost. So sometimes CPC, you can attribute it to a store, or you can attribute it to
CPC is the cost per customer.
the cost per click that you have for Zomato
Cost per
ads
click.
and Swiggy,
Got it.
right? So that cost is to be considered as well. I think from what I know, mostly many brands are operating at about 12 to 13 to 14% at the moment.
Is
Store
that like
level.
ad spend over and above the commission?
This is after all the expense. I'm telling you the store profit. So it's
Okay.
roughly around 10 to 14% store level, which is where I've seen a lot of national brands operating. So that is sort of okay. I think 18-20 would be golden
Okay.
by that.
Okay. And do you think it makes sense today
Mhm.
for example, Keventers has to scale?
Mhm.
We'll talk about how you've scaled in the past and what
Right.
kind of models have worked. But does it make sense that once you've established like offline presence, you might as well just go down the cloud kitchen route if
Mhm.
you're seeing 50% as deliveries? Because at least you're saving a fair chunk of rental cost and the entire doing up the space and the capex in that.
Sarthak, having operated Keventers across 65 cities, we've also realized that there are some cities that have better, uh, work out much better for cloud kitchens. For example, Bangalore.
Okay.
We've noticed that the sales of cloud kitchens in Bangalore, obviously, maybe because a lot more people want to order and repeat is very high in a place like Bangalore. Uh, the cloud kitchen versus Delhi would do probably 50% better or even
Really?
100% better. But our takeaway would do much better in Delhi, because that is our actual gut, right? That's a home
Correct.
ground for us.
So out of, you said you operate in 65
65 cities. We have 200 plus stores today. We also have stores outside India, in Dubai.
I think in Dubai it's at City Walk, or it's
Uh,
that silver
City
truck.
Walk, JBR.
I
That's where
I
we
think
have
I
the two
saw it at the
trucks.
City Walk, the
Mhm.
silver truck, the
That's right.
Keventers
They're
truck.
only, yeah, so City Walk and JBR. So City Walk, you must have seen it there.
There's also a truck I know in Gurgaon, right?
Yeah,
Like
Cyber Park.
at Cyber Park. So, what does the economics of a truck work like? How is it different from this?
So, see, typically what happens with trucks is that they don't fall under the mall. They're outside the malls, right? They're outside the food court area. So the structure of lease is different. They will typically have a 6 month, 11 months lease. So
And no longer,
mostly no longer that. It's
because they
very,
want to try it out. Agar 6 mahine mein if it works, it
it's
works.
also
If it
very
doesn't,
new concept here. We've not seen too many food truck places. I think there was one cluster in Gurgaon, and then Delhi. This was the first opportunity we got around where we could set up a food truck with all the permissions, of course. So the benefit of, obviously, because it's only 11 months, you don't want to spend that kind of money in building the space. And the benefit of obviously having a food truck is you can move it in
Correct.
case you have to shift position, you have to go to some other place. And economics work out fine because the cost is relatively cheaper, maybe about 20-30% cheaper. It's also optimized well. And the footfalls, of course, will be generally food truck places, they attract a lot of food.
so you're saying the cost of bringing the food truck is 20-30% cheaper than making a
Yes, to
store?
make, yeah, it could be.
So it could be about 15-16 lakhs you will be able to bring together a food truck?
I think 15 would be an upper limit, but yes, perhaps you could do it within 10 lakhs as
Really?
well. Right.
Oh, wow. And the revenue share would be about 10%, 10 to 12%?
Again, this is dependent on event to, I mean, if you're
But
talking about.
broadly, like for example, you would have seen if certain places, like say in Delhi, Gurgaon,
Mhm.
you know, a good mall is taking about 18% in terms of
Mhm.
revenue share.
Okay, if you're talking about the like
Real
cyber
estate
park,
cost, yeah, like a
cyber
cyber
park,
park, you've got a
right?
truck.
That will be typically lower. That'll be definitely lower because you're not paying cam, you're not paying other thing. I mean, the rate outside will be definitely lower than the
About 10-ish%.
in terms of rent. I think yes, about 10 to 12%.
And
That's
revenues, you would, if you're doing say 10 lakhs inside,
Mhm.
you might do 7-8 lakhs here.
Yes, you can
So
seven
just
eight lakhs.
a 20% discount
Right.
on what you may do inside.
The only disadvantage of having a food truck is in a place like Delhi because it can get really hot. Certain
Correct. And
so
then there are rainy months and all of that. That's
then
when you lose out on.
yes. So in a place where the weather is good, I think it's a no-brainer for
Yeah.
sure. But in place like Delhi, you have to be very like I feel like the
Hmm.
summer hits us
Even in
bad.
Dubai, right? Like
Mhm.
where you have the food truck,
Mhm.
it is outdoors, is where I've seen it.
It is, but luckily those locations have very high footfall.
Hmm.
JBR, a place like JBR gets really packed. Even I
Correct.
mean, maybe during the sunny hours, it's going to be less people outside on the
But in
road.
the evenings and all, it's
It's
just
very
it
nice
is
and
done.
breezy, as you know
So
it.
it more than compensates there.
Yes, it does compensate for sure.
Okay. So anyone else who's kind of doing a food business in India, be it a
Mhm.
QSR or say a restaurant or something, would you recommend if they want to go international, Dubai has you have to go, like the chances of success? Do you think it's higher compared to the chance of success in India?
See, Dubai is a very interesting market that way. By the way, the unit economics are very different there. I mean, very different in the sense like rent uh, can be less for sure uh, because they want there's a lot of development happening. They want a lot of brands come in. They have a lot of supply and demand. But the other costs can sometimes be very high. For example, the commissions are nowhere close to 20%. I think
Hmm.
in last time I checked, they were hitting about 35 to 40%.
What are you saying?
Yes,
On Noon
absolutely.
and
So
Talabat and all these apps, it's
that's right.
35%?
Yes, the costs are very high to operate delivery, but there we also, the pricing is not a big like you can the pricing can be higher.
2x of India easy.
So we typically try to operate 5 to 7% less on the cog. So if we are doing targeting 30 here, we would target about 23 to 24% in Dubai.
But say how does your pricing change? Like is it 2x of India or is it 2.5? Like how do you think about that?
I think it would be at least 20 to 40% higher there,
Okay, not double.
not double. And but I'm pretty sure that if you some things, if you can make it golden
Yeah,
and look good in Dubai, there's no limit.
correct.
As you know,
Correct.
their love for gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll come back to your growth story. You said you started at Select City Walk.
Mhm.
That did well. Today you're closer to about 200 plus
Yes.
stores across 65
Mhm.
cities. So did you penetrate deeper into Delhi or did you move on to other cities? And when you did,
Very interesting
how did you
question
move?
because I think today when I look back, I think we made a mistake. Uh, if I, if we're doing more brands directly, indirectly in this space as investors or as advisors, I always recommend that we go deeper rather than wider. And the mistake that we made at that time was that we went to Maharashtra, to Karnataka and Calcutta very fast, very quickly. It's always best to first concentrate in one area, so you achieve economies of scales, and then you start moving everywhere else. But yes, of course, there are, depending on investor pressures, depending on opportunities, sometimes you have to overlook and take the plunge and maybe go to other cities. In our case, I think we spread out too fast and now we're focusing on going deeper and deeper rather
Okay.
than just looking at newer cities. We don't want to increase the city count, we rather want to increase our stores per city count.
Okay. So right now, what's your city with the highest concentration? Is it Delhi?
I think Delhi would be upward north of 35 to 40 stores.
Okay.
That's the number we have. I would strongly recommend Calcutta as your second or third choice for
Really?
any brand that wants to get out of their city. But for Calcutta, you got to have a bit of local touch. Huh? Another interesting city apart from Calcutta now is Hyderabad, in my opinion.
100%. Goa, are you in Goa?
Goa, we are not really present in Goa, but Goa is a market to be considered again.
Okay. And what I'm again recollecting from the unit economics that you
Mhm.
told me about was that if you're making about 15 to 20% of profit at a store,
Mhm.
and you're doing about you set up a store in about 20 lakhs,
Mhm.
you're making about say 2 lakhs a month,
Mhm.
1.5 to 2 lakhs a month.
Mhm.
That means you're actually getting your payback on the investment in less than 12 months.
I think it's a little, average wise, there are other costs to be
Or
considered as
15 months,
well,
18 months.
because we're taking 20 to 25 lakhs. It can also take 25 lakhs or even more
But
sometimes.
less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years. I think that's always been the target, that we try and do it within 20 months or 22 months. We've seen it going from 12 months to 24 months mostly.
Okay. And how much of the scaling of the outlets
Mhm.
was bootstrapped, and when did you need external capital?
We've really changed. From the time we started, we've undergone changes also because things have changed in the market, especially COVID, right? Initially, when we started 2015, uh, we through our internal accruals, we were able to get the second location and the third and the fourth. But getting locations takes time, good locations, but you also need to set up your corporate team. You also need to grow faster, I suppose. And for that reason, we decided to get into franchising.
Okay.
Now, franchising is, in other words, it's the fastest way to scale without really
Correct.
diluting yourself. And we decided we'll get into this route. But what has also happened in the market is that this 10% and that 5% that I spoke to you about, GST,
Yeah.
that has hit the customer.
So you're saying the 10% is the royalty that the franchisee pays to
No,
you?
I'm talking about the commission that has been
Okay, the
added.
10% of the delivery commission.
Right, that is in the P&L. It's a
Correct.
part of your P&L, and then you also have to pay a royalty. So the pie hasn't grown that much. For three people to share that has become difficult.
Yeah.
I'm talking third one would be the delivery aggregator in this
Correct.
case, right? So franchising overall became a bit unattractive in our country, I think.
But you tried it. You grew through franchisees,
We
and
grew
then
through franchising, but we saw its problems. I felt it wasn't worth it after all,
okay. So
because of
did
the
you hear
margins
that
getting thinner.
from people who took franchisees in different cities from you to
Ye-
say, "Okay, it's not making money for
Yes,
us"?
and you also have to see people gained more confidence, or they have more, knowledge available, or people are well traveled, I suppose, that creating your own brand makes more sense.
Correct.
Right, today,
Yeah.
why would you want to put in, the effort is more or less the same. You still have to go behind the store. While yes, we are setting it up for you, that part is easy, but just by putting more effort, slightly more effort of building a brand story, you can have your own store and completely control it. Right, with franchising, you have to operate with very strong SOPs. If you don't have SOPs, it's going to be a problem.
What other products would you consider adding that you think, in a QSR format that you're in? You've added waffles.
I
Anything
think
else that you think can go?
Keventers QSR format has limitations because we have space constraints. You also do not want to change your model too much, because then it's very confusing to manage both. Like, you can't have a cafe mentality and then have a QSR mentality.
Correct.
Today we can of course open a cafe, give you that service, but it's also difficult to change that perception of the customer. They like it for its quick service, they like it for its quality and the products we have. We've, waffles, yes, very successful for us early days, but we've had also many products that we've tried that didn't work out for us. The next step to grow the brand of Keventers is to become a household name. And probably the best way to do that is, and the way we've identified, is to go back to where we started. We actually were suppliers to the Indian Army. We used to supply milk powder. We used to make ghee. People don't know this about
Yeah, I
Keventers.
had no
A
idea.
lot of dairy products were made under Keventers. There's packaging, which I'll show you later. Very cool, interesting packaging that we used to have. And that's something we want to bring back again.
In the form of D2C
Yes, in the
products?
form of D2C, I think in pre-packaged form. And maybe we won't, I think we'll be selling it through our stores because, like I said, we have, space constraints.
But quick commerce.
But quick commerce, why not? I think quick commerce is where the action is, and it's a great time to be on this platform. And
I'm just thinking, sorry to interject there, but with quick commerce, what really I'm seeing with the PNLs that I get exposed to
Yes.
is people are not really making money on quick commerce.
yes,
So it's kind of just become a platform to drive customer experience, or people trying your product for the first
Yes.
time,
Mhm.
hopefully developing a liking or a loyalty towards it, so that they come and pick you up offline later, where you
Yes.
may still make some margin.
Right.
And then even when brands are going offline, they're essentially going to your modern bazaar and your modern retail outlets. Even there, the margins are barely anything.
Right.
So till the time you don't penetrate the market, like in general retail,
The general retail, yeah.
there's barely any money being made. So do you think mentally you guys have a framework to say that while quick commerce can be a start for this product, for the ghee and the milk powder, as you said, but it may only drive up revenues. But for real profitability in this much time, we should try and get to general trade or something.
You have sort of hit the nail on the head here, but in our case it's slightly different. But I do understand where brands are coming from. Brands that are trying to establish themselves, they're obviously looking at they're looking at revenue numbers, and revenue numbers are also, they continue to look at revenue numbers because there is some pressure.
Correct.
Right, there is
And the valuations linked
the
to revenue at the
valuations are
moment.
linked, you've raised capital. It's a great place to obviously get the numbers for sure, but I think you can also have a different kind of strategy. I've seen that there are many brands operating at low CM2s, low CM1s, but the way we want to operate is we're not really chasing revenues here. We want, I mean, I've constructed our unit economics. There are unit economics of CM2 being 8 to 12%. It's pretty decent, pretty healthy.
Correct.
For quick commerce. I think that's why we want to approach quick commerce. But we're very keen to also move to other platforms from there, whether it's e-com and also having our own stores. So that will definitely be part of our plans. In another reason why we also like to begin at using the quick commerce platform is that it's a good place for premium brands. Like if you are trying to create a product which is higher in price per unit, say versus a mass
Correct.
product, I think it gives you a good insight of what people are consuming. Interestingly, I was just looking at ghee numbers, and ghee numbers for premium alone just on Blinkit are somewhere in the range of 6 crores per month, and the non-premium is not 100x of that, is probably around 20-25 cr. So it's a very interesting platform where premium products are
Correct.
working.
The nature of the customer.
The
is
nature
such.
of the customer is such today, so good place to learn. Good, as long as you have a decent margin. Don't operate at 1%, 2%. I know many brands are operating at that.
That's
Then
right.
of course it's a bloodbath, I suppose. But if you have decent CM2s, I suppose you can be on quick commerce, learn, but also move to other platforms.
Sure. And I also want to know, like I remember from the time that we used to back in school drink at Keventers. They were known for like massive bottles,
Yeah,
which were all plain, right? Like there was no
there was no branding.
design element, there was no branding, there was no.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say there was no character. It was very uniquely shaped in its own way.
That's right.
But I see how you've changed it. Um, it is smaller. It's got these little grooves and stuff. So how did the designing come about?
This
really?
is in fact a recent one.
Okay.
But I think it's very, the bottle has always been iconic for us, right? Even with or without branding. But you have to look at the time, 2015, 2016 is the age when people, this is before content creators also, right? This is when we were tagging, we were saying we have arrived, and we used to take pictures of the product, we used to put hashtags, right?
That's right.
And having that printed Keventers would really help us, because if they're sharing, I mean, you can clearly read the word
correct.
Keventers. And why we also did customized printing was because people love to collect things, right?
Yeah,
That
you'll put the money plant in there.
Yes,
so
the
you'll probably
money
use it
plant.
like a vase.
Yeah, and we used to
somewhere.
get a lot of, this was perhaps our best form of marketing, right? You mean there's nothing paid, people are just clicking pictures. Even if they don't intend to put a Keventers shake, they're putting that money plant, right?
Yeah.
With the Keventers branding. So it
That's
worked out perfectly. I mean, great for us, and great word of mouth marketing that happened around that time for us.
And how much does a bottle like this cost at your scale? About 8-10 rupees?
It would cost around 8 to 10 rupees, 10 because there's also the luck cap here.
Yeah.
It's of course expensive, more expensive than paper packaging.
Correct.
Paper packaging has also gone up, by the way. It's not too different, but I think the people just generally like to consume products, especially a milkshake in a glass bottle today.
Feels
So-
more premium, feels better.
Feels more premium. We try to go back to paper cups, by the way, because we wanted to start this this value for money range. But a lot of complaints, they're like, bring back the glass bottle. You can bring down the price, but do not replace the glass bottle. So that's why we went back to only glass bottles again.
Makes sense. And thank you, Aman,
No,
for
absolutely.
making all the
Thanks
time
for
to
this.
explain this to
Mhm.
us. And I'm absolutely certain a lot of people who want to start maybe QSR businesses or small time milkshake counters in different parts of the country, waffles and whatnot, can definitely take a lot from this learning. And thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for this amazing, bright and inviting place that you set up and your team. So always good hanging out with you, chatting with you. And thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.
Cheers.
This was episode 7 in season 1 of Founders Office, where each episode dives deep into a new industry and a fresh business model. I hope you watched all of the previous episodes for some absolute banging insights. And I'll see you soon with a new guest in Founders Office with Sarthak Ahuja.